Welcome to Bedtime, stories of calm and grace. This is a story about trees that are never harmed, about patience measured in years instead of minutes, and about work that leaves both the land and the soul intact. Nothing is rushed here, nothing is demanded of you. Let the steady rhythm guide you into rest. Tonight's story is The Cork Harvester. Chapter 1: The Golden Hour. Somewhere in the south of Portugal, where the land rises and falls in gentle waves of gold and green, there exists a landscape unlike any other on earth. This is the Montado, the ancient cork oak forest of the Alentejo region, and it has been here for longer than anyone can remember. The sun is just beginning its descent toward the horizon now, casting everything in shades of honey and amber. The light here has a particular quality in the late afternoon, soft and thick like warm oil, pooling in the hollows between the hills and catching on the rough bark of 1,000 ancient trees. In this landscape, we find a man named Antonio. He is 67 years old, though the years sit lightly on him, carried in the deep lines around his eyes and the gentle weathering of his hands. For 50 summers, Antonio has walked these same hills, learning the language of the cork oaks, understanding their rhythms, their needs, their patient way of giving. He stands now at the edge of his family's grove, leaning against a tree that his great-grandfather planted nearly 200 years ago. The bark is rough beneath his palm, warm from the day's sun. He knows this tree as well as he knows his own hands. Better, perhaps, for a tree is constant in ways that even our own bodies are not. Tonight, as you settle into the comfort of your bed, we will walk with Antonio through the golden hours of harvest. We will learn what the cork oaks have taught him about patience, about gentleness, about the slow and steady gifts that come to those who are willing to wait. But there is no hurry. There is never any hurry in the Montado. The trees have been waiting for 9 years. They can wait a few moments more. The air smells of warm earth and wild lavender. Somewhere in the distance, a wood pigeon calls, its soft cooing drifting across the hills like a lullaby. The grass beneath Antonio's feet is dry and golden, crackling softly with each step as he begins his evening walk through the grove. Every tree in the Montado bears a number painted on its trunk. These numbers tell a story, marking the year of the tree's last harvest. For cork can only be taken once every 9 years. Any sooner would harm the tree. Any later, and the bark grows too thick, too gnarled for harvesting. Antonio runs his hand along the trunk of an old sobrero, feeling the ridges and furrows of the bark. This tree was last harvested in 2017. The white number painted on its trunk confirms what his fingers already know. The bark is ready. In the morning, when the harvest crew arrives, this tree will give its gift once more. But that is tomorrow's work. For now, Antonio simply walks and watches and listens to the evening sounds of the Montado settling into sleep. Chapter 2: The Language of Trees. The cork oaks of the Alentejo are called sobreiros in Portuguese. It is a word that sounds like what it describes, soft and round, with a gentle roll at the end that makes you think of shade and shelter, and the patient presence of very old things. These trees live for 200 years or more. Some of the oldest sobreiros in Antonio's grove were saplings when his ancestors first settled this land, when the low white farmhouses were newly built and the terraced gardens had just been planted. The trees have watched generation after generation come and go, growing slowly, steadily, offering their bark every 9 years like clockwork. There is a saying among the Cork harvesters: a sobrero gives more than it takes. Antonio learned this from his father, who learned it from his father before him. The meaning is simple but profound. The cork oak asks for very little. It needs only the dry summers and mild winters of the Mediterranean climate, the thin and rocky soil of the hillsides, the occasional attention of those who care for it. In return, it gives and gives and gives. Not just cork, though that alone is remarkable, but also acorns for the pigs that graze beneath the trees, shade for the cattle, habitat for the endangered Iberian lynx and the imperial eagle, root systems that hold the thin soil in place against the winter rains, a living, breathing ecosystem that supports hundreds of species. Antonio walks slowly through the grove as the sun continues its descent. The light is growing softer now, the shadows longer. He pauses beside a tree that bears the number 2018 on its trunk. Not this year, next summer, perhaps. There's always something to look forward to in the Montado, always another harvest on the horizon. He notices a young tree at the edge of the grove, its bark still thin and smooth. This one was planted by his son, Pedro, 25 years ago. It has never been harvested, not yet. The first harvest cannot happen until a cork oak is 25 years old, and even then, the cork is too rough for most uses. It takes 2 or 3 harvests before the bark becomes smooth enough for wine corks, the finest product of the Montado. Antonio does the mathematics in his head, as he has done many times before. If this young tree lives 200 years, which it well might, it will be harvested perhaps 20 times in its life. 20 gifts, spread across 2 centuries. His great-great-grandchildren might one day stand where he stands now, running their hands along this same bark, marveling at the tree's patience and generosity. The cicadas have begun their evening chorus now, a rhythmic pulsing sound that rises and falls like breathing. It is the soundtrack of summer in the Alentejo, as constant and reliable as the setting sun. Chapter 3. The Tools of the Trade. In a small stone building at the edge of the grove, Antonio keeps his tools. The building is old, its walls thick enough to stay cool even in the hottest summer afternoons. He opens the wooden door, which swings inward with a familiar creak, and steps into the dim interior. The smell of cork surrounds him immediately. It is a smell like no other, earthy and slightly sweet, with hints of oak and something almost like honey. Over the decades, this scent has worked its way into the very stones of the building, into the wooden beams overhead, into the tools hanging neatly on the walls. The most important tool of the descorticidor, the cork harvester, is the machado. This is a specialized axe with a curved blade and a wedge-shaped handle. Antonio takes his machado down from its hook and turns it in his hands, checking the edge, feeling the weight of it. This machado belonged to his father. Before that, it belonged to his grandfather. The handle has been replaced many times over the years, worn smooth by generations of hands. But the blade is original, forged more than 100 years ago by a blacksmith in a village that no longer exists. Antonio has sharpened it thousands of times, always taking care to maintain the precise curve that allows the blade to slip between the bark and the living tree without causing harm. There is an art to using the machado. It cannot be learned from books or videos. It can only be learned through years of practice, through making mistakes, through developing a feel for how the bark separates from the wood beneath. Antonio's hands know this art so deeply that he rarely has to think about it anymore. His body remembers what his mind might forget. He sets the machado aside and picks up another tool, a long wooden pole with a slight curve at the end. This is used to pry away the larger sections of bark once the initial cuts have been made. Again, it is a simple tool made from the wood of a chestnut tree that fell in a storm many years ago. But in the right hands, it becomes an extension of the harvester's own body, allowing him to feel the subtle resistance of the bark, to know when to push and when to ease back. Antonio runs his hand along the smooth wood, worn shiny by decades of use. Tomorrow, these tools will taste bark again. Tonight, they rest in the cool darkness of the stone building, waiting with the same patience as the trees outside. He hangs the tools back on their hooks and steps outside into the fading light. The sun has nearly reached the horizon now, painting the western sky in shades of coral and rose. The trees stand in silhouette against this canvas, their gnarled branches reaching upward like arms raised in gentle supplication. Chapter 4. The Evening Meal. The farmhouse where Antonio lives with his wife, Maria, stands on a small rise overlooking the grove. It is a low, white building with thick walls and small windows, built in the traditional style of the Alentejo. During the day, the white walls reflect the harsh sun. In the evening, they glow pink and gold with the last light. Antonio walks up the stone path to the front door, his footsteps slow and measured. He can smell dinner already, the rich aroma of caldo verde drifting through the open kitchen window. Maria has been cooking, as she does every evening, preparing simple food with the care and attention of someone who understands that nourishment is about more than just filling the stomach. Inside, the kitchen is warm and bright. Maria stands at the stove, stirring the soup with a wooden spoon. She is 65 years old, her hair mostly gray now, but her eyes are still bright with the same spark that caught Antonio's attention when they were young. They have been married for 43 years. In all that time, they have never once lived anywhere but this farmhouse, never wanted to. "Good evening," she says without turning around. The words are ritual, spoken every evening at this same moment. "Good evening," he replies, settling into his chair at the kitchen table. The table is set simply. 2 bowls, 2 glasses, a loaf of bread wrapped in a clean cloth, a bottle of wine from the local cooperative. Through the window, Antonio can see the last of the daylight fading from the sky, the first stars beginning to appear in the east. "Tomorrow begins the harvest," he says. Maria nods, ladling soup into the bowls. "The crew will arrive at dawn. 8 men in total. They will work for perhaps 3 weeks, moving through the grove tree by tree, stripping the bark with the careful precision of surgeons. It is hard work, physically demanding, requiring skill and endurance in equal measure. But there is a rhythm to it, a flow, that makes the hours pass almost without notice. Antonio has always loved the harvest, despite its demands. Or, perhaps because of them. There is something deeply satisfying about work that requires your full attention, that leaves no room for worry or distraction. They eat in companionable silence, as they often do. After so many years together, there is no need to fill every moment with words. The soup is warming, the bread is fresh, the wine is cool and faintly tart. Outside, the cicadas continue their endless song. When dinner is finished, Antonio helps clear the table. They move around each other with the easy choreography of long familiarity, never getting in each other's way, anticipating each other's movements without needing to ask. The dishes are washed and dried and put away. The kitchen grows quiet. Chapter 5. The Night Garden. After dinner, Antonio steps outside to walk through the garden. This is another ritual, a nightly habit that helps him transition from the work of the day to the rest of the night. Maria understands without asking that he needs these moments alone, and she has never begrudged them. The garden is small but carefully tended. Tomato plants heavy with fruit, peppers ripening from green to red, rows of lettuce and cabbage and kale, a few fruit trees offering their shade. Maria does most of the gardening now, but Antonio helps when he can, finding peace in the simple work of weeding and watering. The night has fully arrived, the sky overhead dense with stars. Here, far from any city, the Milky Way stretches from horizon to horizon, a river of light flowing through the darkness. Antonio tilts his head back and looks up, finding the constellations his father taught him to recognize when he was a boy. There's the Great Bear, turning slowly around the pole star. There is Scorpius, low on the southern horizon. There is the Summer Triangle, Vega and Deneb and Altair, blazing bright overhead. The stars have not changed since his childhood, since his father's childhood, since the oldest trees in the grove were saplings. They are perhaps the only thing in this world that remains truly constant. The air has cooled now, still warm, but no longer oppressive. A light breeze stirs the leaves of the fruit trees, carrying with it the scent of ripening figs and the distant smell of lavender from the hillsides beyond. Antonio breathes deeply, feeling the tension of the day begin to leave his shoulders. He walks to the edge of the garden, where a low stone wall marks the boundary between cultivation and wildness. Beyond the wall, the land slopes down toward the grove, the trees now visible, only as darker shapes against the star-filled sky. Tomorrow, he will walk among them with his machado. But tonight, he is content simply to stand here, watching, listening, feeling the vast patience of the montado settling into his bones. A barn owl calls from somewhere in the darkness, its cry like a question floating on the night air. Antonio waits, and after a moment, an answer comes from farther away, another owl responding to its mate. They are hunting, these owls, gliding silent through the darkness on wings made for stealth. They too are part of the montado, part of the web of life that the cork oaks sustain. Chapter 6. The First Tree. Morning arrives slowly in the Alentejo. First, the eastern sky begins to lighten, the stars fading one by one into a pale gray wash. Then comes a band of rose along the horizon, spreading upward, warming to orange and gold. Finally, the sun itself appears, rising through the haze like a copper coin floating in cream. Antonio is already awake. He has been awake since before the first light, lying quietly beside Maria, thinking about the day ahead. When he finally rises, he moves with the deliberate slowness of a man conserving his energy for the work to come. The harvest crew arrives shortly after sunrise. They come in a battered truck, 8 men ranging in age from 23 to 71. They have worked together for years, some of them for decades. They know each other's strengths and weaknesses, each other's rhythms and habits. When they work, they move as a single organism, each man anticipating what the others will do next. The youngest is Carlos, Pedro's son, and Antonio's grandson. This is only his third harvest, and he is still learning. Antonio watches him carefully, offering quiet corrections when needed, praise when deserved. One day, perhaps, Carlos will lead his own crew, will stand where Antonio stands now. But that day is far off. For now, he is here to learn. The first tree has already been chosen. It stands near the center of the grove, a massive sombrero, perhaps 150 years old. The number painted on its trunk reads 2017. The bark is thick and deeply furrowed, warm to the touch, even the relative cool of the morning. Antonio approaches the tree alone, leaving the rest of the crew to watch from a respectful distance. He places both hands on the trunk, feeling the rough texture, sensing the life that flows beneath the bark. There is a moment of communion, silent and private, between the man and the tree. Then he steps back, takes up his machado, and begins. The first cut is always the most important. It must be placed exactly right, at the junction between the old bark and the new growth, angled just so to allow the blade to slip beneath without cutting too deep. Antonio makes this cut with the practiced ease of 50 summers, the blade singing briefly as it meets the wood. A strip of bark begins to peel away from the trunk, revealing the smooth reddish wood beneath. This inner layer is called the mother, and it must never be damaged. Any cut that goes too deep, any slip of the blade, and the tree will be scarred for life. The harvesters take this responsibility seriously, treating each tree with the reverence it deserves. Chapter 7. The Rhythm of Harvest. As the morning progresses, the work takes on a steady rhythm. The mikados sing their brief notes. The bark falls away in wide strips. The crew moves around each tree like dancers in a slow and ancient ballet. Antonio works methodically, starting at the base of the trunk and moving upward in a spiral pattern. His movements are economical, precise, honed by half a century of practice. Each cut is exactly where it needs to be, neither too deep nor too shallow, following the natural contours of the bark. The bark comes away in sections shaped like half moons, each piece perhaps a meter wide and half a meter tall. These pieces are called branches, and they will be stacked at the base of each tree to cure in the sun, before being loaded onto trucks and taken to the factory. The curing process takes several weeks, during which the cork loses moisture and develops its characteristic properties, the lightness and flexibility and impermeability that make it so valuable. The rhythm continues, unbroken, hypnotic. The sun rises higher, and the day grows warmer. The cicadas begin their chorus, joining the rhythm of the work, creating a layered soundscape of industry and nature intertwined. Antonio pauses to wipe the sweat from his forehead. He looks around at his crew, scattered among the trees, each man absorbed in his own work. Carlos is struggling with a particularly stubborn section of bark, and Antonio walks over to help, showing him how to angle the blade, how to use the wedge at the end of the handle to pry without forcing. Patience, he says. The bark will tell you when it is ready to let go. You cannot force it. You can only listen. Carlos nods, trying again. This time, the bark separates smoothly, falling away in a clean sheet. He looks up at his grandfather with a grin of accomplishment, and Antonio nods in return. Some lessons can only be learned through experience. But with each tree, each harvest, the understanding deepens. The work continues through the morning and into the early afternoon. By midday, the heat has become intense, the sun beating down through a pale blue sky. The crew pauses for lunch in the shade of a particularly large sombrero, sharing bread and cheese and slices of cured sausage, passing a jug of water from hand to hand. Chapter 8. The Afternoon Rest. In the hottest part of the afternoon, work stops. This is not laziness, but wisdom, a recognition that the human body has limits that must be respected. The crew retreats to whatever shade they can find, some lying down to sleep, others simply sitting with their eyes closed, conserving energy for the work that remains. Antonio finds a comfortable spot beneath an old sombrero, his back against the trunk. The bark of this tree was harvested years ago, and the trunk is now covered with new growth, softer and smoother than the thick cork that will develop over the coming years. He closes his eyes and lets his body sink into the earth. The sounds of the montado wash over him in waves. The cicadas, of course, always the cicadas, their endless song rising and falling like breath. The occasional call of a bird, the whisper of wind in the leaves, the far-off clanking of a cowbell from a pasture somewhere over the hills. His breathing slows. His thoughts drift like clouds across an empty sky. He is aware of his body, the ache in his shoulders from the morning's work, the pleasant tiredness in his legs. But these sensations are distant, muted, observed rather than felt. He floats in a space between waking and sleep, neither here nor there. Time passes. How much, he cannot say. The quality of the light changes, growing softer, less harsh. The shadows lengthen. The heat begins to ease. Somewhere, a wood pigeon begins to call, its voice like a mother soothing a child. Antonio opens his eyes and lies still for a moment, letting himself return slowly to full wakefulness. The other men are stirring now, stretching, yawning, reaching for their tools. The afternoon shift will be shorter than the morning, but no less important. There are still many trees to harvest before the day is done. He rises slowly, feeling his body protest briefly before settling into acceptance. This is the bargain he has made with time. His body will do what is asked of it, but in exchange, it demands rest and gentleness. He has learned to listen to these demands, to honor them. The harvest can wait. The trees have been waiting for 9 years. A few more hours makes no difference. Chapter 9. The cooling hours. As the afternoon wanes, the work resumes at a gentler pace. The men move from tree to tree, speaking little, focused on their tasks. Machados rise and fall with practiced regularity. The bark comes away in clean strips, revealing the smooth, reddish trunks beneath. Antonio has moved to a tree at the edge of the grove, one he has been looking forward to harvesting all day. This is an old tree, perhaps 200 years old, with a trunk so wide that 3 men with linked arms could not encircle it. Its bark is thick and deeply textured, marked by decades of growth. He begins to work, and immediately he knows that this tree will be special. The bark separates with unusual ease, coming away in large, clean sections. There is no fighting, no resistance. The tree gives its gift freely, almost eagerly, as if it has been waiting for this moment. Antonio works slowly, savoring each moment. He is aware of the tree in a way that is difficult to put into words. It is not quite communication, not in the way humans communicate, but there is something, a kind of understanding that passes between them. The tree knows what he is doing, and it approves. By the time he finishes, the sun is low on the horizon. The other men have already begun to gather their tools, preparing for the walk back to the farmhouse. But Antonio lingers, running his hand along the newly exposed trunk, feeling the smooth wood beneath his palm. "Thank you," he whispers. It is something he has done since he was a boy, a habit learned from his father. "Thank you for your gift." The tree does not respond. Trees never do, not in ways that can be heard. But Antonio feels something nonetheless, a sense of acknowledgement, of connection. He turns and walks toward the setting sun, leaving the tree to begin its 9-year cycle of regrowth. Chapter 10. The Evening Light. The walk back to the farmhouse is peaceful. The men move in a loose group, talking quietly among themselves, their tools slung over their shoulders. The day's work is done, and there is a sense of satisfaction that settles over them like a comfortable blanket. The light at this hour is extraordinary. The sun has dropped below the horizon, but the sky still glows with color, deep oranges and reds fading to purple and indigo. The Cork oaks stand in silhouette against this canvas, their branches reaching upward like dark lace against the burning sky. Antonio walks at the back of the group, watching his crew, his family, his community move through the ancient landscape. Carlos is laughing at something one of the older men has said, his young face bright with the joy of a day well spent. The sound of his laughter drifts back to Antonio like music. He thinks about the trees they harvested today, about the bark now stacked in tidy piles beneath each trunk. In a few weeks, trucks will come to collect the cork and take it to the factory. There, it will be sorted and processed, transformed from raw bark into the products that people around the world will use. Wine corks, of course, but also flooring and insulation, and the soles of shoes. But that is not his concern. His work is here, in the grove, with the trees. The rest is for others to worry about. He's a harvester, and that is enough. The farmhouse appears on its small rise, its white walls now glowing pink in the fading light. Maria stands at the door, watching for their return. When she sees them, she raises her hand in a brief wave, then disappears inside to finish preparing dinner. Chapter 11. The Quiet Hours. After dinner, the night settles over the Montado like a gentle hand. The crew has dispersed, some walking to the village, others driving home in the battered truck. Antonio and Maria sit on the porch of the farmhouse, watching the stars emerge one by one. The silence is profound, not empty, but full, rich with the sounds of night. Owls calling, crickets singing, the distant bark of a dog, the soft whisper of wind in the cork oaks. These sounds weave together into a tapestry of peace, each thread supporting the others. Antonio's body aches pleasantly from the day's work. His shoulders, his arms, his legs, all carry the memory of labor. But it is a good ache, an honest ache, the kind that reminds him that he is alive, that he is part of something larger than himself. Maria reaches over and takes his hand. Her skin is warm and familiar, mapped with the geography of a life well lived. They sit together in silence, needing no words, watching the darkness gather around them. The harvest will continue tomorrow, and the day after, and for many days to come. But tomorrow is tomorrow. For now, there is only this moment, this porch, this sky full of stars, this woman beside him, this peace that settles deeper with each breath. Antonio closes his eyes. He can still feel the rhythm of the harvest in his body, the rise and fall of the machado, the gentle resistance of the bark, the satisfaction of each clean strip falling away. Chapter 12. The Dreams of Trees. In the space between waking and sleeping, Antonio finds himself walking through a grove he does not recognize. The trees here are impossibly old, their trunks wider than houses, their branches reaching so high they seem to touch the stars. He walks among them slowly. trailing his fingers along their bark. Each tree hums with a low, almost inaudible vibration, a sound like distant singing. The ground beneath his feet is soft with fallen leaves, each step silent and sure. He understands, in the way one understands things in dreams, that these are the ancestors of the trees he harvests. The first cork oaks, planted by hands long forgotten, tended by generations who have returned to the earth from which they came. They are waiting for him, welcoming him, recognizing him as one of their own. He comes to the oldest tree of all, so massive that he cannot see where its trunk ends and the sky begins. He places both hands on its bark and feels a pulse, slow and steady, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. The tree is alive in ways he never imagined, aware in ways he cannot comprehend. And the tree speaks to him, not in words, but in understanding. It tells him of the countless seasons it has witnessed, the rains and droughts, the fires and floods, the coming and going of countless creatures. It tells him of the patience required to grow so slowly, so steadily, for so many years. It tells him of the joy of giving, of the deep satisfaction of offering its bark every 9 years to those who come with reverence and skill. Antonio listens. He does not need to respond. The tree knows his heart, knows his gratitude, knows the love he carries for the Montado and all its inhabitants. They stand together in the dream grove, man and tree, connected by bonds deeper than words. Chapter 13. The return to stillness. The dream begins to fade, edges softening, colors bleeding into darkness. Antonio feels himself sinking slowly, gently, like a leaf falling through still water. There is no fear in this descent, only peace, only the deep and abiding rest that comes after honest work. He is aware of Maria beside him, her breathing slow and regular. He is aware of the farmhouse around him, its walls holding the warmth of the day, its roof sheltering them from the vast and ancient night. He is aware of the grove beyond the window, the trees standing sentinel in the darkness, their bark slowly beginning to regrow. 9 years, he thinks. 9 years of growth, of healing, of patient accumulation. And then another harvest, another gift, another cycle in the endless turning of time. The trees understand this rhythm in ways that humans struggle to grasp. They know that there is no need to hurry, no reason to rush. Everything comes in its own time, at its own pace, according to its own nature. Antonio's thoughts grow softer, more diffuse. They are no longer thoughts in the usual sense, but more like clouds, drifting and dissolving, reforming and drifting again. He is descending now through layers of consciousness, each one deeper and more peaceful than the last. The harvest will continue. The trees will give their gifts. The sun will rise and set over the golden Montado. And somewhere in this ancient landscape, a man will walk among the sombreros, his hands knowing the bog, his heart knowing the trees, his life woven into the slow and sacred rhythm of the cork oaks, the eternal grove. And now, as you settle deeper into your own rest, let the images of the Montado wrap around you like a warm blanket. See the golden hills rolling toward the horizon. Feel the rough bark beneath your fingertips. Hear the singing of the cicadas, the calling of the owls, the whisper of wind in the ancient trees. The grove has been here for centuries, and it will be here for centuries more. Its patience is infinite. Its peace is eternal. And you, like Antonio, are welcomed into its shade, invited to rest beneath its branches, embraced by its slow and steady love. The stars wheel overhead, the same stars that have watched over this land since the beginning of time. The trees stand silent and wise, their roots reaching deep into the earth, their branches reaching toward the light. And you, cradled in the heart of the Montado, drift slowly, peacefully, inevitably towards sleep. Rest now. The harvest is done. The trees are at peace. And you, like the cork oaks, can let go of the day. Let go of your cares. Let go of everything except this moment, this breath, this gentle slide into dreams. Sleep well. The Montado holds you. The ancient trees keep watch. And when the morning comes, as it always does, the grove will still be here, golden and patient, and forever at peace.